if I'm going to be the real deal on here, the time in the morning is my favorite. I wouldn't even call it my genius time. My heaviest contemplations lately have been on wanting to share concepts about good and bad, self-will, free will, and just in general, how we have pride about ourselves. And so I think good and bad, having a sense of what you value and a sense of what you don't value, can really help guide into like your sense of pride, or it fills in your sense of shame. And the idea of free will and self-will is a concept that I study a system called the fourth way, and occasionally I just randomly go back and find myself just finding one concept and then just kind of picking on it, because technically it's a little bit overwhelming to take on all concepts. So in a video that I thought was going too long, I was kind of sharing, like, if you're in your journey and sometimes it could feel like, oh my God, what, I'm supposed to be doing all these things and actually I'm doing none of them. So like when you hire a coach or something, they give you a space to share, but a lot of people I hear need like action. And so like action would be, in my opinion, would be sort of polishing the diamond of contemplation of what do these things mean, and like how can you continually unwrap what it means and how it plays into your life. So good and bad. How do we get rid of guilt and shame? And like, how do we have more self-will or free will? So good and bad, let's just start with the idea that like we were taught as maybe women or just even as children that like a good little girl or good little boy usually was like calm, quiet, and obedient. And as a woman, I only want to be a good girl when it has like a sexual connotation to it and it just feels like naughty and good at the same time. But in reality, what good and evil means to us now as adults was given to us when we were younger. So maybe, you hold the belief that it's bad to have sex before marriage. And then just to be point blank, like those of us who have had sex, we know that there's really nothing bad about it. Maybe the shame and the guilt that we have because we went against a belief system that we actually never really questioned. So, is it technically good or bad at that point? Because what you believe is good or bad is often, not even often, it is totally programmed. It's given to you. And at some point you can ask the question of like, do I even believe in this? Do I even care about this? Like, another good and bad thing, maybe we're taught that something is actually really good for us. But as you get older and you have these conflicting experiences, that somebody will say, religion is good for you. I think even like as, it was kids in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, we were taught that milk was really good for us. Or actually that cigarettes were totally fine for smoking when you're pregnant. That's a better one. And so later you find out like, oh shit, that's not good for me. Like I decided after I did some research, felt into it, it's not good for me. And so we kind of come into this idea again of like self-will, or not come into this again, but like I take that idea of good and bad and I put it into self-will and like how we have like a free will and how we don't have a free will. So if you're not questioning this particular understanding of like what's good and what's bad, and what's right and what's wrong, and if you don't question it and you think you're making your own decisions, but your decisions are heavily weighed on what was given to you, is that self-will? Or is it's a mechanical decision that you're going to make no matter what because you've never even grappled with it. It was given to you, you never asked questions, and then you went for it. So that idea of self-will and free will, and self-will, I think, is more primarily the idea, even just simplifying, that you're protecting the ideas that you were given Whether you question them or not, you're protecting them as if you believe in them no matter what. Sometimes it's totally okay to believe in what we were given. All I'm saying is I think it's important that you ask the questions about what you were given. So your self-will is kind of like, and this example that I'm learning in life right now is, my self-will will say that I love sleeping. Like, I want to sleep in, I could sleep in, I have slept in until like 1 in the afternoon. And so my self-will will say that if I have to wake up early, I'm sacrificing sleep. This is going to be hard for me. There's no really good or bad in there just yet. But if I sacrifice sleep and like feel kind of like I suffer a little bit for 5 to 10 minutes while I wake up, I get hours, like I gain in the actual sense of the word, right? Or sense of the sacrifice, because I'm only giving up sleep, but I'm gaining hours. So my free will would say, because my free will is going to be attached to like who I actually am and what my actual aim is. So like my actual aim is that I want to live, I want to experience life. I want enough time in the day to do the things that matter to me. I have goals I want to achieve, yada, yada. So my free will would be linked and locked into that actual goal of who is my highest self? How do I get to know her? What experiences do I need to fill her soul? Yada, yada. Well, so it turns out that like waking up in the morning and getting my own soul straight before I go out into the world is really actually more important than the extra sleep. So it's, you know, which one is which? Is it free will or is it self-will? Because self-will is before you even know yourself, you've been given yourself, you created an identity in an actual, most terms, your two identities. So you don't really have a one self. And so I think free will would primarily mean that you would have gotten to the place where you're just one individual, Ashley. I don't have to like portray Ashley as my representative out at work or the gym or with my friends. I could just be this one version of myself. And the one version of myself definitely likes sleep, but also notices the way that my soul is full when I'm awake. I mean, and quite literally, like all the things of being awake, like not being asleep. And it's not lost on me that as much as I want to find my awakening, like I'm a sleepy person. And so just my free will says I can change that. And so back to good and bad or right and wrong, a lot of spiritual texts in one way, shape, or the other will say that like your good and bad is only going to be determined on like what your ultimate will, your ultimate aim for yourself is, like what your dharma would be, or how to start counteracting your karma in yogic terms, or maybe, you know, in Christianity, good or bad, a lot of the good that you could offer or that was presented in the Bible was essentially like confess, atone, and accept forgiveness. And I think that has a huge like awareness of like what have you done, and like not necessarily in the big terms of what sin is. I've read in another book that from the Latin version of it, it's just a mistake, which we continue to make mistakes. And a mistake, good or bad, right? A mistake could be this simple. I need to go to Florida from here, and that is southeast. And I get on the road and I go northwest. It's wrong because that's my aim and I'm going the opposite direction. So it's that kind of simple idea of everything in right and wrong is saying which direction you're going. But if you've never decided for yourself which direction you're going, then like you're never necessarily doing anything wrong, which is actually, in a way, it's kind of funny to think that like I want to tell everybody about these kind of concepts, but like technically you're not doing anything wrong if you're just following the crowd. but you're also not really doing anything right either. You're not doing anything for yourself. You're just like following the pattern. So it definitely, you are really in no right or wrong, but you feel in your own truth that you're doing right or wrong things. And when you mechanically do something good, you could still feel good about it, but you didn't do that out of the goodness of your heart. You were mechanically trying to, you're appeasing the crowd that you live in. Versus if I don't live in the crowd and I walk my own path, there's automatically a struggle there of if I'm doing something wrong because I'm doing something different. And if you do something in that wrong space and you kind of fight with it a little bit and you push back and you find you experience what it feels like, what right feels like, you end up with something a little bit different. And then your idea of right and wrong are at least shifted to where it's not so rigid. You have more of an open mind and you can notice and tell when you're living in that very black and white place of this is right and this is wrong. It really only begins to make sense when you want to be the driver, when you want to decide what it is that you're doing in your life. And kind of until then, you're really off the hook. But then you're also off the hook for like, I feel like shit and I don't know why. So this is like, you're going to kind of come against, there's a lot of coming against yourself. And I think that interestingly enough, in my own perspective lately with not using Instagram, in a fourth way was saying with the self-will, is if you just continue to do the things habitually like a mechanical experience, like just autopilot, you're not creating any energy and you're not really you're giving energy, but you're definitely not getting any energy back, and your intention is like low energy. So when I reach for my phone and I grab Instagram right away and scroll for however long I scroll, it's very passive. It's very like, there's no struggle. It just falls right into play. But fourth way says that when you struggle against the contradictions inside of you and you do the work, because the work is what your aim is. So you can ask yourself, before I do this action, does it have a payoff in my aim? Is it heading in that direction? Because otherwise it's not. And so you have to experience this for yourself. I don't know how else to explain it, but it'd be like, the first couple of days that you go to the gym, you feel really great, but it's like those 8th and 20th days that you go to the gym that this starts to really kick in. Is you continue to choose your aim over any of the self-will stuff that's really more habitual and mechanical. And because of that, you start creating energy. You got a yes and a no. They bang together. They create a spark. That spark keeps you moving. You're riding the wave. You can overcome the certain like challenges in your life. You could see things clearer, yada, yada. You've got more time, whatever, right? It doesn't even necessarily mean like you get this and then you get this. Sometimes it's just like, wow, I just feel better. You don't necessarily need to have money or power or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You could just feel better. And it just feels a little bit better for me in like the idea of self-authority when I can figure out what good and bad means for me. And then I could be like, well, it's only bad in some people's idea that I lay around and watch TV for an entire day after I'm tired. Some people, that's like what they wish they could do, but they're still kind of saying that that's a bad thing to do, but like they wish they could do that. So in the morning times when I'm contemplating on relief. Like, how can I understand something different, and how can I apply it, and how can it bring relief to my life? I think that the idea of always weighing out the scales of good and bad create, for me at least, a lot of shame and guilt, whether it is around sex, money, or death. We all have our own experience, but technically it's a shared experience. We just like to hide it ourselves. So there's, I think, the same way that we are not talking about sex, money, and death, we're not talking about good and bad. And my other video was about play, and I think that a lot of us would find that playing, just at the core of it, needs to have sort of no agenda. It needs to just be to be present and see what happens. But that's already really challenging for people. So that's already bad. So thank you for being in my space. I just rambled there more than anything, and just sharing my concepts on these things. And I'm in my robe, being the most me I could be, and it feels really nice. And I suggest and recommend this for you too. So thank you for being in my space. Thanks for being in my friend circle. Have a beautiful day.